Well, good morning, everybody. It's Father John Wilson here on what day is today? It's Tuesday. It's May 26th. Well, I mentioned yesterday how we were talking about the real controversial topic, but maybe I should have saved that warning for today because if there's one thing that gets people nervous, perhaps even more than the Sixth Commandment, it's the Seventh Commandment. Talking about money. You shall not steal. So there are two really important principles in Catholic belief um, about the goods of this world and how we're supposed to use them. Um, so one of them is the goodness and the justice and the of private property, right? Thou shalt not steal implies that there's a thing that belongs to someone else, and actually, private property is something that's willed by God. Um, when He gave us dominion over the things of this world. That's part of our great dignities. We govern. Kind of in his place, as his deputies, in this world and then this cosmos that he created. And for each one of us is part of our dignity and part of what we're supposed to offer back to God in worship is to govern our little patch of it, our the place where we have influence. Um, you know, implying as well the things that we own, and to steal something that belongs to someone else is an offense against that dignity. It's an offense against the person, even if in your judgment that person doesn't need that thing. That's not your. It's not your place to make that decision. And therefore, it's interesting, because that theft is an offense against the dignity of the person. It's an offense against all of us. Theft is a crime against society. Even if you return it and you make nice with the person, there's still a wound that's been opened in our common good, our common life together. Because like the state of justice is something that we all share. So yeah, stealing's a big deal. But it's not enough just to say that okay, private property, and that's part of the the dignity of the person that they get to decide what to do with it. No, with all created things, we have to ask the question, what is it for? What's it for? And everything in this universe, what's it for? It's for the glory of God. Um, and we have to use the things of this earth in line with the glory of the giver. You have to use them for what they're for. And if these created things of this earth are given to us for our dignity and for our provision, for our sustenance, you know, material destitution, like dire poverty, is an offense against that dignity, and ultimately it's an offense against the Creator. That someone should be left in a condition like that. It's a countersign to the goodness of God, and it can, even for someone who's in that situation, can lead to despair. We are bodily creatures, and that matters. Um, and this is why it's so important to realize, God identifies himself with the poorest of the poor. This is so clear in everything that Jesus said. Um, and that matters for how we use the goods that, quote unquote, belong to us. That, you know, and so the second principle is actually called the universal destination of goods. They're meant for the glory of God. They're meant for the common good, which means that they're meant, very specifically for the relief of the poor. Um, Listen to St. John Chrysostom. This is actually quoted in the Catechism under the Seventh Commandment. He says, not to enable the poor to share in our goods is to steal from them and to deprive them of life. The goods we possess are not ours, but theirs. And he says the demands of justice must be satisfied first of all, and that which is already due in justice is not even so much a gift of charity. It's justice. The goods that we have are for our use, and they're for the poor. So we have this principle called the universal destination of goods. That the goods we hold, even when we hold them in private, are their purpose, their end is something more common. And we can say that because there's not some kind of like radical dichotomy between the dominion that I exercise privately and the common good that we're all responsible for. We are God creates us for society. God creates us for others, and that matters for how we spend these goods. So some examples of just kind of how this cashes out in practice. Actually, some things that kind of look like stealing but actually aren't. And the first example is kind of silly. I use this with the school kids. I mean, say there's a pen on your friend's desk, and like you're alone in the classroom, and all of a sudden you really need a pen. You need to like put your name on a paper right before you hand it in, and you don't have your pen handy. So you want to use your friend's pen, and right, ideally you should ask to use your friend's pen because the dignity of her ownership of that pen means that you want to give her the opportunity to say yes. You want to give her the opportunity to do good with her belongings. But if there's that emergency, like you can actually presume what her answer will be, because it would be completely unreasonable and against the very purpose of the pen and against the very purpose of its existence as a created good for her to say no to your need in that moment. So if you're unable to ask, use it, put it back, and that is not at all theft. You're using the pen for what it's for, according to the wisdom of God. Second example is this is kind of like the if you ever seen the musical or read the book Les Mis, the Jean Valjean example. Why is he in jail in the first place? It's because he stole a loaf of bread to feed his starving niece. Like the kid was near death from starvation. And in situations like that, there's no one to ask. Presumably, I mean, otherwise he should have. But the fact of that dire need, changed the very nature of the act. It wasn't stealing anymore, because that in that moment, that bread belonged to that starving girl. Now, obviously, you can't make a general rule about this stuff. It's prudence and an assessment of the situation is completely irreplaceable. But in his situation, that was not theft. So you got the universal destination of goods, and then the responsibility to care for the poor. And so like that should really shape the way that we think about our stuff. One of the things that you see so clearly in the Catechism is that ostentatious luxury is a sin against the Seventh Commandment. If you're got so much stuff that you're just essentially wasting it for your own puffed up pride, that stuff belongs to the poor. Now, we read that, we hear that, and we might start getting anxious. And maybe that's good anxiety, and maybe that's unnecessary anxiety. Because what we shouldn't be thinking, like, oh no, I just rented a place down the shore for the weekend for my family because it was Memorial Day. And I didn't need to do that. And, what if that money could be, fighting malaria in Africa or something? Um, Calm down. All right. So there's nothing in the catechism that, like, spells out specifically, okay, how much is too much, right? Like, there's no replacement for prudence in this stuff. And, ultimately, our rest, our leisure, our security, I mean, that's part of the dignity that God wants for us. So we're not meant to be like bean counters about this stuff. And ultimately, if we're going to take our duties towards the poor more seriously, there's really no replacement for just falling deeper and deeper in love with Jesus Christ. And that's going to give us the heart to want to see him and serve him more in the poor. And that is going to start to change our perspective on how we spend our money. And, probably for all of us, there's something there. There's something that we should let prick our conscience and change our spending habits. Another important point when we're thinking about this, that our responsibility for the common good is strongest on the local level. It's strongest with those we actually share a common life with. Remember Jesus' parable about the rich man and the poor man Lazarus. What does the rich man go to hell for? Well, he doesn't go to hell for not solving the problem of world hunger. He goes to hell for neglecting the poor man who is at his door. We're going to have some more opportunities for paying attention to the poor man at a door in these days, I think. And we should let that shape how we act with our money. How we treat our neighbor, how we pay attention to our neighbor. Maybe we should start buying things more from our neighbors. There's a lot to think about there. So in general, one final principle for you guys. The Seventh Commandment, like, you're already getting the sense that this does have something to say about the way we live in society. And so here's the other thing that is sometimes talked about as stealing that's not actually stealing, and that's taxes. All right, taxes aren't stealing. Especially when that tax. And you would say, yes, of course, private charity that comes directly from the choice of the person is the ideal. But, in a true Catholic vision of society, there's not meant to be some, like, harsh opposition between the individual and the state. Yes, we are individuals. We have that dignity directly from God. But our nature is ordered to friendship, ordered to living in society. And part of living in society, part of that society, not the sum total of that society, but it requires order and actually the exercise of authority for the common good. Part of that common good, of course, is that there be no destitution, no dire poverty among us. And so public authorities have a role there. And we shouldn't be... It's kind of an artificial thing to think of this thing called the government as some arbitrary power outside of me. And, okay, yeah, it has to be there, but its job is to restrict my freedom. No, our government is actually an expression of a common good that is also my good. At least it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be. And so now, if the state's not supposed to be that arbitrary power outside of my good, well then, of course, it shouldn't act like it. And, it's a problem when it does. So, unfortunately, we see lots of governments wasting money, spending it on unjust things, arbitrarily exercising their authority. And that is also injustice, and we should call out that injustice, right? Nothing in Catholic social doctrine says you just have to kind of roll over and play dead when your government's doing something that isn't good. That's not what justice is about, and that's not what the common good is about. Because when that government is acting unjustly, that'll warp people's understanding of what society truly means. It'll warp people's understanding of the common good. That's bad. But, we have to recognize as well that abuse doesn't delegitimize the proper use of public authority. So I guess my final recommendation for you guys is really, as much as you can, dive into the fullness of Catholic. Oh, sorry for the delay there. All I was saying, dive into the fullness of Catholic social doctrine. The popes have written some great stuff, especially recently. There are some deeply true things there about who we are and the dignity God has entrusted us with. Anyway, that's the Seventh Commandment. I'll see you guys soon.